I'm Tim Ventura, and we're joined today by Stephen Bassett, political activist, disclosure advocate, and the executive director of the Paradigm Research Group, founded in 1996 to end a government-imposed embargo on the truth behind extraterrestrial-related phenomena. Steve has spoken to audiences around the world about the implications of disclosure, the formal confirmation by heads of state of an extraterrestrial presence engaging the human race. He's lectured around the world on the political implications of UAP and the ET phenomena and given over 1,200 radio and television interviews. And his advocacy work has been extensively covered by national and international media, including CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and in the Washington Post and New York Times. In 2013, Steve's organization conducted a citizens' hearing on disclosure at the National Press Club in Washington. In November 2014, he launched a 2-year political initiative out of D.C. that injected the ET issue into the 2016 presidential campaign. And in December 2023, he co-founded the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance in Los Angeles, a new media-centric organization working to align those working with the UAP and ET research arena with writers, directors, and producers across every facet of the global entertainment industry. These are only a few of his achievements. So before we get into things, I want to remind everybody to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Click the subscribe button. If you are on YouTube watching this right now, it is very easy. It's free. There's no obligation at all. Click subscribe, sign up. I also want to remind everybody to follow Steve on Twitter and visit his website at the paradigmresearchgroup.org. I'm going to put links to all of these in the show notes. And again, please subscribe and help us grow and get the message out. So Steve, welcome, sir. It is truly a pleasure and an honor to have you with me today.
Tim, it's an honor to be with you, my friend. I follow you on Twitter. You're one of the most insightful and thoughtful people dealing with this issue right now.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So you have been described as Washington's UFO lobbyist. And I view that in a good context, right? A lot of people say lobbyists, they have bad connotations, but I think that what you're helping to do is get the word out, inspire political activism, and help spread a message of activism. And that is incredibly important. And right now, I can't think of anyone better to walk us through this controversial UAP Disclosure Act issue. So that was co-sponsored by Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer of New York and Senator Mike Rounds of South Dakota. And it has been, I think, as we all know by now, it has been effectively gutted. Now, I did discuss this last week with Daniel Sheehan, but I would love to get your professional opinion on it as well.
Well, first of all, I'm a political activist and a registered lobbyist. I got known because I was the first one to ever register as lobbyist on this issue, so nobody else was stupid enough or insane enough to do it. And so that was my hook. That's what got me interviewed by the Washington Post, big article, and launched me in a sense. But when I quote registered as a lobbyist in 1996, nobody in the Hill wanted to talk to a lobbyist on this issue, right? First of all, I had no money at all. I couldn't donate 10 cents to anybody's campaign. And the issue was still ridiculed. Though at the time, I was not aware in 1996 when I arrived in DC that the Rockefeller Initiative was just wrapping up and had been going on for 3 years. I had no idea. I didn't find out till later. But so what did I do? Well, I lobbied, but I didn't lobby the Congress because it was pointless. I lobbied the media. And probably nobody's engaged the media more than I have in the last 20 some years. I'm not saying that I've engaged at the highest levels. I mean, I'm not a contributor to CNN or anything. And they used to bring me on way back, the early aughts, but I kept coming on and saying things that I wasn't supposed to say. You know, it's like you're supposed to come on and say certain things about this issue. Don't go too far, right? Because we sort of know it's real. We want to do something, but we don't want to go too far. And I come on and just say, hey, here's what's going on. And they go, oh, God. And so I wasn't getting invited back. Hopefully that will change soon. However, You know, until they get around to it, I got several thousand podcasts I can do. So look, in order to understand what just happened and is happening now, you have to, first of all, step back from the painting and see the whole painting. Otherwise, you're just you got your nose right up against the thing, and you can't really see it properly to assess it. The legislation that is about to be passed signed by the president, rather, it's already been passed by the House and Senate. It's done. It's going to be signed, I think, on the 21st. Is the fourth tranche of legislation, serious tranche of legislation regarding UAP ET phenomena in history in the United States. I think there's a couple of little things that turned up in some other countries, maybe some little legislation of some type, maybe Brazil, maybe Peru, I don't recall. But in terms of the US, we never had anything before this. And then all of a sudden, we have 4 tranches in a row. So it has to be viewed in the context. The initial legislation was it began in the Senate Intel Committee, which shouldn't shock anybody. That is considered the most important committee, maybe not the most powerful, but in terms of national security, the most important committee in Congress. And after years of briefings going on behind the scenes, witnesses coming up to Washington, many of them were assisted in that regard by Christopher Mellon, who was kind of leading that behind the scenes briefing process, but there were others. And they were getting briefed and briefed and briefed and briefed until they sort of got up to speed. They were watching other developments going on and made the decision it's time to actually step into this as formally as the U.S. Congress, right? And by that, I don't mean the couple of briefing meetings they had in the early days, the one in front of the Andrew Carson's committee and so forth. I'm talking about legislation. Right? You can have briefings all day long, but if they don't lead to legislation, they're not particularly useful. So Marco Rubio made the first move. He sponsored legislation in the 2021 NDAA bill, which is the National Defense Authorization Act. That was signed, I think, December 28, 23, something in 2020. It's notable that this work done to create this language that ultimately ended up in this first modest bill was done during 2020, which just happened to be the worst epidemic in the world and in the United States in over 100 years. Millions of people were dying. The economic impact was enormous, but this bill still got put together and signed by the president. It did this and it did that. And then immediately a new piece of legislation was started to be put together for the 2022 NDAA. And this also was coming out of the Senate Intel Committee, and that was sponsored primarily by Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. Right? After that was signed in December of 2021, they started developing language for the third tranche of legislation. This was sponsored by Mark Warner, who was, in fact, at that time, the chairman. The first bill was by Rubio. When he was chairman, now you've got the third tranche of legislation sponsored by Mark Warner, Senator Mark Warner, who was the chairman of the Intel Committee. So it's all Intel Committee, appropriately. And now we've got 3 pieces of legislation. The second piece was twice as long as the first. The third piece was twice as long as the second. That was signed in December of 2022. The issue kept advancing in many ways as we entered 2023. 2023 is going to go down in history as a very, very big year for a lot of reasons. And so the disclosure pace was underway. We're moving towards disclosure. We're moving towards confirmation by the president. And the legislation is in service to that. So that's the first point before we get into 2023. That's the first point that I have to emphasize for the umpteenth time. I have done or will have done between November 15 and December 15, which is now, 49 interviews on this subject in 30 days. I'd done quite a few prior to that, but this is the most dense group of interviews I've ever done. And every single one of them, I try to get this message out. And I've been doing it now for approximately 2 years. I have tried to get on the major networks, CNN, MSNBC. They want none of it. I was scheduled to go on News Nation, which is leading the coverage on this. At the last minute, they said, we don't want you. Somebody got to them and said, don't bring this man on. But I'm going to keep doing it because nobody is saying this. Nobody is going on any of these shows and saying what I'm about to tell you right now. And it's absolutely critical. And that's this. All of this legislation, the briefings that took place in the years prior, the education of Congress, the setting up and then in developing the infrastructure, which starts out as the UAP task force and then becomes something else and then something else until it becomes ARROW, which was an excellent landing point. I love the acronym and it's appropriate. They kept changing the name to try to accompany the evolving scope of what they were building. Right? It's like somebody building a house, and while they're building it, the wife has a baby, and they go, "Oh, we got to add a room," right? Then she has another one. You have to add another room, and so they end up with the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, which is the whole package. Okay, it's the total pack, covers everything we want to cover. Good. They set all of this up. Meanwhile, the NASA jumps in. And said, "Oh, we're setting up a investigation. We're going to investigate the UFO stuff." First time they've ever done that. They haven't been able to touch this issue. They did that, and other entities were holding up their hand and saying, "Yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to do that." And all of this is happening. Why? And this is the question that doesn't get asked and doesn't get answered, right? Properly, except on great podcasts like yours. Okay, that's getting asked and answered there. And what is the answer? Why are they doing this? Simply because they're just so tired of being bugged by fools like me, and they just got to do something to get us off their back? No. Is it the reason that the vast majority of people who are not knowledgeable on this subject think, which may include all of the Gen Zs, a lot of the millennials, and just a lot of people around the world who haven't got time to focus on this because they're barely able to survive? They don't know. But here is why. This has absolutely nothing to do with the United States government or any government, frankly, that has an air force and is high tech to finally trying to figure out what this is. Nothing. Zero. Absolutely nothing. They already know what it is. They've been studying it for 7 decades. They have bodies. They have multiple crash vehicles. They have put technology in the hands of government contractors to develop and try to expand scientific implications. They're working on antigravitics. They have bodies so they can actually study their genetics. They have been studying it and spending billions of dollars for 70 years. They don't need to go now and, quote, figure it out. Okay, if that's true, then exactly what is the answer to that question? Well, the answer is actually pretty straightforward. If you're not closed off because of certain biases, all of this is being done because a critical mass of people who serve the United States in the military intelligence community to protect it from all enemies, and we have enemies, was reached, in which it was clear to them, this ever-growing critical mass, that the truth embargo was done, that this policy was going to end. It had to end. It couldn't survive. And by truth embargo, I mean the formal policy that the government would not confirm there is an extraterrestrial presence, would deny, would obfuscate, would introduce propaganda, in little intimidation, whatever it took. The confirmation of the extraterrestrial presence, the lack thereof, which is what I came to call a truth embargo in the early aughts, was uber all. It simply had to last. Well, it wasn't going to last. It was coming to an end, and they knew it. And what is the end of the truth embargo? It is when the president of the United States, it could be the prime minister of the UK, not going to happen. It could be Xi Jinping, could happen. But a head of state, with all of the authority and gravitas that attends that person, goes in front of the people of that country and says there's an extraterrestrial presence and is more than capable of backing up that statement with all the evidence you could ever want, since it's all over the place, that is disclosure. And that is what they knew was coming. And it looked like it was going to be President Biden, who has known about the ET presidents probably for 40 years. There isn't a president that hasn't known that there's an extraterrestrial presence. I'm willing to stake my life on that. It is not a difficult assumption or speculation. It is a speculation because we don't formally know that. But if you know anything about the nature of power, whether it's political or economic, if you have that kind of power, there are people lined up all the way down the street who want to tell you things. You don't need to have the CIA invite you over to look at the dead bodies and review the crash vehicles. That's not going to happen, and hasn't probably happened except maybe with Nixon and possibly Eisenhower. But in terms of being tipped off there's an ET presence, of course they were. The decision was whether they would do anything about it, and the decision was no. We'll leave that to the military intelligence community, which I trust to protect the country. And so the end of the truth embargo is when President Biden steps out in the East Room of the White House in front of a whole lot of media who may or may not have an idea of what's coming, and says that, yeah, I've been watching the Senate hearings, which are coming. I've listened to this unbelievable testimony. I've made some inquiries. I've talked to some of my top people, And yes, the consensus is we are not alone. There's non-human tech here. There's non-human entities here, which very likely are from other planets. However he wants to say it, that's disclosure. Boom. But here is the problem. And let me put it this way. Imagine this scenario. Years ago, could be 5, 6, 7 years, whatever. Our intelligence community learns. Before the To the Stars came out in October of 2017, let's go back to 2016. Our intelligence community learns that, right, as some sort of a political mover in the middle of that campaign to upstage our presidential election, Xi Jinping has made the decision, we've just learned this now, nobody else knows, that he is going to go in front of the 1.5 billion Chinese and announce that, hey, there is an extraterrestrial presence. We've known about it. We have technology. That's why I have such a great space program. And by the way, I think we can own the moon, right? We're working on that. And we're gonna become a major factor in this in space and the solar system. And yes, there's an extraterrestrial presence. And here's the evidence. And we find that out. And we've got 3 days because it's going to happen on Friday. Here is the situation that we would face. Xi Jinping, the head of, the leader of China, confirms the extraterrestrial presence. It goes worldwide in 24 hours, completely around the world. The president of the United States will absolutely have no choice but to come out in that East Room and say, yes, that is true. We do have an extraterrestrial presence. And we've known about it too, not just the Chinese, and we've been dealing with it for years. Okay, now imagine the day after, when the whole world, I mean, Xi Jinping is going to get a lot of attention, but so is our president. The whole world descends in a way on the White House. Every briefing room in Washington, D.C. is packed to the walls with reporters demanding thousands of questions be answered. There's no legislation. There's no arrow. There's no been briefing of the Congress. There's no preparation. NASA's not involved. The military people haven't said anything. It's just chaos. The United States is sitting there. I mean, the United States is facing absolute chaos without any proper way to deal with it. Everybody's going to want to know everything at once, and we haven't got any structure or any law set up to deal with how we're going to get that information out.
Well, Stephen, if it's okay, let me jump right into my next question, because you have set this up just
I'm setting
absolutely
up the answer to the first question, but jump in now. I've made my point.
Well, the UAP Disclosure Act contained provisions for a process of controlled disclosure, which have been removed. Can you tell me about the alternative, something that is called catastrophic disclosure?
Well, first of all, that's not the alternative. So I'll answer your question by closing out the other one. It's all about setting up all of the infrastructure necessary for when the president discloses. Okay. And the nature of setting all this up did not permit them to come out and say, why are you doing it? Well, because there's ETs here, right? That's why we have to do it. You can't do that. So they're in this rather strange place where they've got to prepare for the announcement of extraterrestrial without announcing it. And they have to be, they can't be straightforward. They have to manipulate language. It's awkward, it's difficult, but it is going to get the job done. Now, with respect to the last legislation, what's important about what happened with this bill is the way it came about. And this is history playing with us, right? History, whatever you're, what is that thing? What is it? Whenever you make plans, God laughs at you, right? So the plan was moving forward pretty well, slow, but given the circumstances that are happening in the world, it's hard to argue that exercising a political process of this importance during the chaos that's been going on, right? War, all this stuff was going to be difficult. So it's still slow. And it was too slow for David Grusch. This was a problem that they knew about. The Intel Committee knew about it. The Department of Defense knew about it. The IG office at the Intel Committee knew about it. Or the Intel Intelligence Community, IG, they knew about it. They knew that he had an unsatisfied guy here, an unhappy man.
Well,
Because
and if I could jump in, what I have seen is the legislation you're referring to, there seems to be a trajectory to it. As you have said, there's a trajectory of larger and larger and larger disclosures, and more is being revealed. And one of the things that I truly felt was David Grusch was a wild card. He appeared, I realize it wasn't out of nowhere, but in terms of the media, he appeared out of nowhere and he changed the narrative. And one of the things that I said at the time was, okay, we had a narrative that effectively started with the Nimitz encounters and it gradually increased, and we were learning more and more and more. When he came into the picture, he reconnected it back to UFOs going back to 1945, as well as the Washington encounters, all of the classic mythology, stories, history, whatever you might call it. He brought all of that back into the picture.
yeah, the more you know about the issue, the more you can see that. But you're right. I like the word narrative. What is going on is a play is being conducted. It has 3 acts and an epilogue. But it's not a play where all the cast members have gotten together and rehearsed extensively, planning everything out. Everybody's memorized their lines. They've got their marks out on the stage. No, you can't do it that way. This is a play in which all the parties kind of know what the play is about and how it should roughly go. And because they can't get together and have those staff readings, they have to just sort of play it by ear as they work forward, but they kind of know where it's all going. It all ends with disclosure. Okay. And so they're proceeding pretty well, and it's going pretty well. But Grusch, unfortunately, was not in the script. And he ended up doing what they, I think, were afraid that he might do. That is go public as a whistleblower. So he really played well, first of all, he's going down in history. Secondly, he is a hero. Third, he might even get the Medal of Freedom, Presidential Medal of Freedom on this before it's all said and done. So Grusch, because he was working for the UAP task force, his job was to receive information as part of the initial legislation. All right. And he took it seriously. And because he was that person working in the UAP task force with the intel background, there were people inside working on very deep projects who felt he was someone they could talk to. And they did. And it's at least 2 of them were working directly on non-human technology engineering. And they told him that they were. And they told him that there were bodies that were also accumulated when they got these crash vehicles, which they've been working on. And Grusch, impressed by that, took it to the Intel Committee, as far as I know. He took it somewhere. I think it was the Senate Intel Committee. Wherever he took it, it was legit. And so he's simply doing his job. He is doing what he thinks he's supposed to do. And obviously, he just got confirmation of something huge. But what did not come out right away, what was not clear right away, which allowed a lot of the usual crowd, I say crowd, certain individuals who we can depend on to jump on Grusch and start doing their thing. What they did not either hear or heard but didn't get was that Grusch had years of experience in the intelligence world. He had contacts, substantial contacts. If you look at his resume, it's obvious that he has those contacts. And he did something appropriate. He contacted some of these people who have classified status. So he's not, I think, breaking the law. And he's saying, I heard this. Can you confirm it? And a number of them did. They said, yeah, that's true. So now he goes, I think, to the Intel Committee after he's done that with what amounts to secondhand testimony. But give me a break, skeptics, for God's sakes. And so he goes there and they're going, whoa, yeah, it's pretty intense. The problem is that they weren't ready to deal with that. It was too soon. And so they couldn't really act on it. And so he goes back, he's back doing his job. And all of a sudden, he starts getting problems because he in other words, he wasn't supposed to be on the stage, right? He wasn't in that act. And so some guys had to go up on the stage and grab him and remove him in a way. Not exactly, it's a metaphor, but essentially he started getting grief over this. You weren't supposed to do that. It's too soon, yada, yada, yada. And he started getting enough grief that he actually goes and takes his complaint to the Inspector General's office of the intelligence community. I don't know if he went to the DOD IG. He may have, right? But he might have gone straight to the intelligence community because that's his background. And so he goes in with this complaint that I'm getting harassed because I told some people that we have non-human tech. Whoa. And you're thinking, well, they're going to have to deal with that, right? They're going to have to say, look, my friend, you're overreacting. There is no such thing as non-human tech, blah, 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 blah. So look, just go back, keep your mouth shut. No. They could have done that. But he was well represented. When he goes into the IG office, he is being represented by an attorney, Charles McCullough, who just happens to be the first Inspector General of the intelligence community, the one just previous, the first, because it was recent entity. He was the first Inspector General, and he is representing Grusch in his complaint. So guess what? His complaint was approved, and measures were taken to cool the jets of whoever the hell was giving him, probably under their own name, grief inside on this act that this measure that he took. And so, okay, he's getting some relief. I think he indicated he tried to discuss this with Arrow as well, but Arrow is in no position to deal with this. It wasn't set up to deal with this. Arrow was set up to deal with the post-disclosure world, not now, right? That's why it's kind of like just there. It's just to exist. And poor Sean Kirkpatrick was made the mayor of that Potemkin village. It had an awful, awful job. And I have nothing but empathy for the guy, but that's the way it was. So they didn't deal with it. And finally, but he starts getting threats anonymously. In other words, the IG office can tell certain people around him, don't you do anything with this guy, leave him alone. That doesn't mean they could stop threats being passed under his door or delivered anonymously through social media, because that's the world we live in. You want to threaten somebody? It's easy. You want to defame somebody? No problem. You want to keep it anonymous? Absolutely. This is the world we live in. So now he's getting threats to his family. And so he makes the decision, I'm going public as a whistleblower. And no one had ever really done this. Now, Greer has accumulated many, many witnesses, and they're part of his world. And he has brought them out going back all the way to 2001. He has brought them out recently in another press conference. It was held, I think, a year and a half ago, and so forth. And I think some of them view themselves as whistleblowers as opposed to just witnesses, because they're not the same thing.
Yeah.
But nobody has done what Grusch has done, which is do it.
If I could jump in for a moment, are there more Grushes waiting in the wings? Are there more whistleblowers who are going to come out maybe next year, maybe in the next year or two?
There are plenty of witnesses not only waiting in the wings, but have already come forward. But there aren't that many whistleblowers. And again, this is something that I cannot overemphasize. Folks, there is a massive difference between a witness and a whistleblower. It's not trivial. Everybody, oh, whistleblowers, oh, we love it. Look, all you whistleblowers come out. Oh, yeah, we want whistleblower. Yeah, you don't want to be one.
Yeah.
It is not a path you want to take. A national security whistleblower is entered in a path that is really tough. And many have gone there and never come back. And so a whistleblower is a witness that comes forward and says, I'm involved in something going on in the government that is illegal. It is unacceptable to me ethically. And so I'm coming forward and telling you this illegal thing is going on and very likely breaking the law in doing so. I am a whistleblower. And guess what? Very quickly, somebody released his medical records. Just happened to point out that he had gone through some very tough times, therapy, considered committing suicide, was suffering from PTSD, just happened to happen. All right. And then he got attacked. He got attacked by Sean Kirkpatrick, a mistake, but I understand why Sean did it. So that's what whistleblowers face. And now he's continuing to get death threats. The people, almost all of the witnesses that are going to testify before the Senate Intel Committee, hopefully in January, are not whistleblowers. They are witnesses. They are individuals who have important information that they're prepared to give under oath to a committee. They are not claiming that the government is involved in grotesque illegal acts. They may think that, but they're not saying that. And they're not breaking the law. And so for every whistleblower, there's 100 witnesses. And most of the people who could be whistleblowers inside the government are probably not going to come forward and shouldn't come forward. You want to know, at least initially, why? Because we don't need them.
Stephen, let me ask, do you have any estimated timeline, taking into account the changes that David Grusch has introduced into this process? Do you have any estimated timeline? Again, we were talking about a trajectory a moment ago. You know, we see this legislation increasing in UAP transparency over time. Is there going to be a timeline for what we might call full disclosure? And if so, do you have any thoughts on when that might be?
Well, there is a narrative, there is a goal, and I think everybody, I think most people, I think, involved are leaning towards sooner than later, but there's so much going on in the world that impacts the ability to get this done. But I do have a sense of timeline. But again, before I go there, you know, your listeners need to understand more about Grusch. I mean, you just can't slip over that. Let's talk about why Grusch has affected this timeline.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
When he comes forward and makes the decision to let Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal put an article in the debrief. Now, they wanted it in the New York Times. They wanted it in a much bigger, higher level legacy media. They couldn't get it. It's not for some nefarious reasons, is that the story was huge. And it's the kind of story that if you're talking to the editor or publisher of the Washington Post, we're talking Pentagon Papers level stuff here. They have all kinds of potential liabilities. And so they have got to vet this to death. They got to go to the lawyers. And there was they could not do a, quote, rapid response. And so ultimately they went to an entity that could, the debrief, which is a wonderful entity that specializes in certain areas with top journalism. I love it. They did the story. ABC News wasn't, Stephanopoulos, and I could talk about Stephanopoulos. I have a beef with him. But the point is that he wasn't going to interview him. And so Ross Coulthart did it on News Nation, which, by the way, is right up as the one of the media that covering this the most. They are literally up at the top of media worldwide that is covering this the most. It's amazing. They have literally this issue for News Nation, which is a well-funded, growing entity that was, I think, intended to be a more reasonable version of Fox News, is growing like crazy. And this issue is to News Nation, was the Iraq War, was to CNN. It literally made CNN. It made it possible for it to become a major news entity. That's exactly what's happening to News Nation. And so they do the interview with Coulter on News Nation. June 5. I actually was sitting with 200 people. We learned about it that morning. Everybody's going nuts. We all got together in a room at the Renaissance in resort in Indian Wells and watched it live as it was happening. One of the most interesting moments of my life. And then we went into a major ballroom, and Danny Sheehan and Richard Dolan were up there actually talking about it to all these people gathered together. We knew something huge had just happened. All right. And so he goes public in June the 5th, saying that we have non-human tech, non-human bodies. He was told this by inside people. He confirmed it with other connections he had in the intelligence community. And boom, he's just dropped an ontological bomb into the garden party. And then the question was, what in the hell is going to happen now? Because that is not in the script. He's just advanced the issue. He has created huge problems for the Senate Intel Committee, for the president, for the Congress in general, for the DOD. And I'm going, whoa, you've really done something special here. Okay. And so here is what happened. Here is how he affected history, right? It's June the 5th. The Senate Intel Committee is watching this and going, we're not ready for that yet. But somebody else was watching it. The Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer. Now, Chuck Schumer had been staying out of this whole thing. If you watch the development of this legislation and everything that's happening, you cannot find Chuck Schumer anywhere. Why? Because he's the Senate Majority Leader. He is a political figure. In other words, he is the Majority Leader of the Senate, which is a Democratic entity. So he is one of the Gang of Eight. He is a very powerful and highly political leader of Congress. And they want to keep politics out of this. They want it to be nonpartisan. So he stayed out of it until Grusch. So he's sitting there. What am I going to do? Grusch is being attacked, right? And that will continue. The whole process of legislation is kind of now, what do you do now? I mean, you're going to put together a law and pretend that Grusch didn't just say this? What are you going to do? And he made the decision, I'm not going to force the Intel guys. I'm not going to force my good friends on the committee, whether it be Rubio or Gillibrand or Reid or Warner. I'm going to step in. And so he gets together with Mike Rounds, who is on the Armed Services Committee. He's not part of the Intel Committee. So they're off to the side, right? Now, this is not the Intel Committee. And they put together what I think amounts to 50 additional pages added to the bill as it was being put together already by the Senate Intel Committee.
Well,
it
and
goes
Stephen,
from 20 to 73 pages.
And let me jump in for a second, because I think that you are touching on an incredibly important point. The Senate Majority Leader of the United States added to an act language saying that defense contractors are in possession of recovered alien spacecraft. That is giant.
That's essentially what it says, but it's far more interesting than that. I think, and by the way, I think that the initial submission was more like an amendment. He made it an act, right? He made it an act. So they put it in and said the whole package is an act. And so what he did, and it was 39 days. It took 39 days from the time that Grusch went public, and I think caught a lot of people, not everybody by surprise, but he caught a lot of people by surprise. He had 39 days. So he and Rounds get together, and 39 days after that, he goes forward, and out of nowhere, he comes forward and says, I am putting legislation into this section of the 2024 NDAA. And it includes the one that caught everybody's attention, it includes eminent domain. So again, he just didn't come. In other words, he went right to the, he not only addressed it, he went right to where it had to go. If there is non-human tech in the possession of defense contractors or anybody outside government, that's kind of a big deal. And he says, we are declaring, this act will declare eminent domain over all of it. And some people go, a lot of people don't know what the hell eminent domain is, right? They think it only applies to real estate. And so by saying that, he says, we own it. And what he's basically saying is that we have paid huge sums of money to these contractors to work on this technology for decades. And God knows what we've developed from that, but it's probably pretty cool. And since the researchers on our field have a decent amount of evidence that we have cracked the anti-gravitic issue and are able to fly anti-gravitic craft. Now, I think the evidence is pretty strong, but it's not 100% certain. But I think we've cracked it. We obviously we've spent decades, and not only, but from the standpoint of the defense contractors, they've been doing all this work. They've been paid well, but they can't capitalize on it. They can't go public with, that tech patented by them, put into, and literally make what could be billions of trillions of dollars. But they couldn't, because there's a truth embargo, and you can't suddenly come out with, your new anti-gravitic craft, for everybody. You can go from here to Europe in like 15 minutes, no big deal. No, they can't do that. Or energy systems or anything else. They've had to patiently sit there waiting for the day that they could one day cash in. And all of a sudden, Schumer comes out and says, well, no, we own it. Now, why did he do that? There's multiple reasons there. First of all, by declaring eminent domain over non-human tech, he confirms that there's non-human tech. Okay. I mean, so basically he's just confirmed Grusch. And so what Schumer did in that regard was basically tell the world, leave this man alone because he is telling you the truth. I just confirmed it.
And he's also fleshing out the opposition. The people who oppose it, obviously, are on the payroll.
And he knew it. That's right. He knew this was going to happen. And so it talks about but he also includes, there's other things in this, right, which includes a lot. It includes a great deal more than that. But the eminent domain is what got the attention. Now, the rest of the stuff in the bill, which is incredibly powerful, which got less attention, is notable for this very important reason. And by the way, on my website, paradigmresearchgroup.org, right there on the front page, you don't have to go down very far, you have two links. One to the original UAP Disclosure Act that was submitted by the Senate, and the other to the bill that finally got done. And I've converted them to easy to read format and highlighted them. And so you can go and you can literally compare. You can read one, read the other, and compare them back and forth. So that's up on my website. So what Schumer decided to do, and believe me, this is my interpretation. I don't have, he doesn't call me up. God knows I'd give anything to sit down with him for lunch, but that may never happen. The point is, this is what I believe he was trying to do. Somebody has got the goods on that. Tell me, and I'll change my story. The point is, he made the decision that this thing had gone on pretty far. A lot had happened, and now Grusch just advanced it. He just pushed it forward he just cut in line, right? And it's 39 days. Now let's go for it, right? We cannot continue to drag this out because there's other David Grusches and they could turn up at any time. And this is getting to be a little out of hand. Why? Because non-human tech has just been confirmed. Is the president going to come forward and say, has the extraterrestrials here? No, not yet, because the legislation isn't there. And so the thing is hanging over the White House and everybody else in government. And we can't actually get it done. We can't get to disclosure yet. We're stuck, right? We can't, and there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, you could destroy Grusch, you could kidnap him, you could make him disappear like Navalny, whatever. You could do a lot of things, but that's not going to work. And so he chose to confirm him, but he had to go further. And so what he and Rounds put into that bill, because they felt they had to do it now, they put in the whole package. They put into this legislation everything that we needed without having to do any more legislation. Everything that we need to do prior to the Senate holding the key hearing that we need to have, which then allows the president to disclose immediately, virtually, which could happen. Which could happen. You know, he does this. He does this in July 14th, right? Now that was some time ago. So he does this. They put this legislation into effect, but it's not going to get signed to December. Plenty of time for the Senate to hold a hearing while we're waiting for that legislation to pass. And if the Senate had held that hearing and those witnesses had testified, it would have set up the president to disclose and almost guaranteed that that bill would have been passed as is. But again, so much was going on. I mean, I just cannot tell you, right, what was going on. And so, but they decided, look, we'll make our move in terms of the Senate hearing after we get the bill passed. And so he puts it all in there. It is all there, everything that we need. In other words, he's going for the gold. It's got the eminent domain. It sets up a review board with subpoena power. It sets up certain committees and certain committee chair people as having full classified status. In other words, it gives not only subpoena power to a number of people as part of a larger review process, which is called the UAP Disclosure plan, the disclosure plan. And also gives them the clearance they need, highest level clearance and access to everything. In other words, a member of that review board wants to go to some military base in the West and go down 45 floors and say, I want to see the dead bodies. I want to see and we're told, no, you don't have the clearance. Yes, they do. And if the answer continues to be no, some MPs are going to cart that person off to jail, and that individual is going to have that status. They have full access to everything. Subpoena power, full access based on the clearance, a review process called the disclosure plan, right, including a presidential review board. It's got everything. But, and I think that Schumer knew this, that like all of the things that have come before, starting with the New York Times article, going through the briefings that were happening on the Hill, the classified reports that came in, the legislation of 2020, 2021, none of those really put the squeeze on or hit the managers of the truth embargo or the holders of that tech particularly hard. And what Schumer did was punched him right in the nose. And they said, whoa, okay, you want to play hardball? Let's play hardball. And he knew they were going to do it. And so what happened next, right? And this is taking place between July the 14th and up until just recently, is that the people that are managing the truth embargo within government, as well as the fine people that run these defense contractors, which are public corporations whose fundamental obligation is to serve their shareholders, they said, we got to stop this. And they knew how to do it. They had plenty of time to go to their intermediaries because they couldn't come out publicly. You know, they weren't going to put out any and give any interviews. Like the chairman of Lockheed Martin was going to call a press conference and say, look, we are not going to give eminent domain or allow that for that non-human tech we've been working on for 60 years. No. They went to intermediaries that got in touch with members of Congress that they knew supported the interest of these defense contractors and or supported truth embargo overall forever. They focused on the ones that were going to be the conferees, and they said, or at least influence the conference reconciliation process. and said, that's where you pull it out. In other words, you got to do it then. You're going to do it. In other words, you do not let that bill stay intact for the president to vote on. And so they began, and we did, and that was going on for weeks before we got wind of it, I assure you. But
Yeah.
obviously it was inevitable that it was going to become apparent there was a pushback on that bill. Now, for most people, all they heard was there's a pushback on the bill, and they're getting all upset. They don't know the reasons, the why, the who, and the whatever. But if you're, paying attention, it was pretty clear. The pushback initially came from Mike, the three Mikes. Mike Turner, who was the chairman of the House Intel Committee, a Republican committee. Mike Rogers, the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, which is a Republican committee, right? And it also came, I'm missing a mic here. I'll get it. Anyway, it comes from those two people. Now, as it happens, and this is no shock, the defense contractor industry, which is vast, they help build our nuclear subs, our jets, our satellites, you name it. They're vast, and they've made huge sums of money. The defense contractor industry gives millions and millions of dollars to the campaign of these people. Not just Republicans, but Democrats as well. Millions and millions of dollars, because they want those jobs coming. They want those contracts. They're making a fortune. God bless them. And the way our system works now is it takes $2, $3, $4, $8, $10 million to get a job that pays you $200,000. We broke that system, and that's the way it is. And until we fix that, well, guess what? We're going to have to deal with that. And so they went to the people that they're donating this money to, which includes Turner and Rogers, and said, you get rid of this, probably, or you can forget any donations from us.
Yeah.
And so that's where the push begins. Would it have succeeded? Don't know. However, somebody else jumped in, and we didn't learn about this till later. I didn't learn about it till quite late. And that gentleman was Mitch McConnell. And he's not just anybody. He is the former Senate Majority Leader, one of the most powerful Republicans of all. And he jumped in the side of the contractors. But I have a feeling that Mitch McConnell was also representing people within the military intelligence complex who are very Republican, more conservative, who want the truth embargo to never end. And so they were pushing on that. McConnell then got in touch with Turner and Rogers, right? And basically let them know that he was on their side. And that gave him great leverage. Why? Because whatever McConnell, and he was also talking to the senators. I mean, he's lobbying the Senate. Look, we don't want this. We don't want this. But what leverage does he have? The Senate is run by Democrats. The leverage is simple. If you can convince enough Republicans to vote against these things, or not willing to support the act unless they're changed, that bill can't get passed. And so this is hardball politics going on in Washington. Now, what's cool about it, for those that are going, I'm so angry, this is so wrong. Massive standard hardball politics at the highest level is going on about what? It's going on about the presence of extraterrestrials engaging the planet. I mean, this is what we've always wanted. And so this goes on until finally they win. All right. Now, what they won was essentially to remove from the bill everything that gave power to the process over the interested parties on the other side of the truth embargo. In other words, the ones that are going to benefit from it, the ones that want it to stay for national security reasons, their philosophy, it basically took all of the power to really give them a hard time. The subpoena power, gone. The review board, which would have had full classified access, gone. The committees, which would have significant oversight and full access and subpoena power, gone. The domain, eminent domain, gone. So they gutted the power. But what you will see if you read the bill that's interesting is that they kept the essence.
Yeah.
The original bill set up all the infrastructure necessary, the legal basis, protections, and everything else for and the intent was clear. Everything that is in the secret world of the United States government on this issue, everything, every document, every file, every report, every study, bodies, tech, everything, to eventually come out of that secret world through a review process, being divulged to the public on the way and ending up in the archives with what we call the postponement clauses, which gives very clearly, it states why along the way, some of it could be postponed. In other words, technically it is all headed there, but it could be postponed. It's not about this much can be kept secret. No, everything is on the table for review and submission. But we may postpone some things, but we have to say why. There has to be reports and it has to be revisited. And of course that's appropriate, because the disclosure process that's coming after the announcement, it's not going to be in a week. That stuff is going to be coming out for years. But I assure you, from day one, stuff is coming out. And people are going, whoa, that's cool, that's cool. And they will understand that some things are going to take longer than others. Though I can promise you that whatever the time frame the government has for the, quote, small d disclosure post-confirmation, it's going to be shorter than they think. All right. So all of that, the concept is there. It's in the bill. It talks about the archives. It talks about the postponement aspects of it. It just doesn't have the same, a force compared to it. And a perfect way to sum up the difference between these two bills is this. In the new bill, the watered down bill, which is about 11 pages in the format that I set up, whereas the other one is 33 pages. Okay. So there you go. Got that. In the new bill, non-human is mentioned twice, and that's important. In the original bill, it was mentioned 25 times. So there is the situation. And so we got a watered down version, but it still has the essence. It's going to be signed on the 21st by the president. And so essentially nothing is really changed in terms of the fundamental path, and now a fundamental script, which gets me to your question. Here is what is supposed to happen. And I think that there are plenty of people on the Hill that believe this. I think there's plenty of people on the Intel Committee that believe it. That's 4 pieces of legislation. Pretty much things are set up. Arrow is set up. It's all there. And so all that needs to happen now is the Senate Intel Committee hearing that we've been promised since going back, 7 months by Gillibrand personally said we were going to have it, right? They signed every member of the Senate Intel Committee signed, I think, 2 letters. I think one went to the Arrow and one may have gone to the White House about the fact that this has got to come out. We got to get this done, blah, blah, blah. So every one of them is signed on the dotted line. There are dozens of witnesses and maybe 1 or 2 whistleblowers ready to testify tomorrow. All they have to do is call them up and bring them. And by God, because I know something about some of the interviews that have happened, is that they better damn well pay their airfare and put them in and pay for the hotel. Do not call them and tell them to come out here to testify on their own dime. Show a little respect. All they have to do is call them. They could be here in 3 days. And these witnesses, which will include Grusch, and probably include the 2 people on the UAP USAPs that gave Grusch the original information about the craft. That would be firsthand, would it not? And others. 1 week is enough. 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, each day, 5 days, 20 witnesses. Those witnesses testifying under oath, almost every one of them military, almost retired. Some may be active, which means that 1, they took an oath when they signed up to serve. Their full careers are known. They're fully vetted. They know of everything they've done. There's no mysteries here. We'll blow the truth embargo to bits. And it will blow it to bits in front of an audience that could be 5 million, 50 million, 500 million. Just depends on how much they promote it. But it's going to be a big audience. And once that is 1 week, the president walks out the East Room, confirms it's true in an appropriate way, in a non-political way, meaning, hey, what can I say? You watched it. I watched it. My Secretary of Defense watched it. All my top aides watched it. My God, it clearly indicates we're not alone. So we're not alone. And you want to know more, and I'm gonna make sure you find out more. That's disclosure. That could all happen in January, early February. That's the plan. Now, the question then is, why does it have to happen in January and February? Why can't it just wait another year? Right? They're out there. We got the law, sort of there, right? Relax, take it easy. It's going to come. It's going to come. And for a lot of people who don't know this subject and don't know this history, it's like, okay, I got enough problems, right? I'm just trying to get by, pay the bills. But for the people that understand the situation in this world and politics and this issue, no, it's not like that at all. Why does it have to be in January or February? There are two very good reasons. Right. And this is pretty much something that any of the legacy media do not want me saying, on their dime, I assure you. Two reasons. One, in case anybody hasn't noticed, the global situation right now is as dangerous as it's ever been, maybe more dangerous than ever. The war in Ukraine has triggered the most concern and public statements by top people in governments, including our government, not just people, that have a theory. I'm talking high-level top people, that the risk of nuclear war is greater than it's ever been. The doomsday clock is now the closest it's ever been. It's 90 seconds to midnight. Yeah. There has been ample discussions for 2 years now about the fear that tactical nukes will get used. So, yeah, that would be a bad thing, a tactical nuke. If a single nuclear weapon is used in war, in other words, if the Russia fires a tactical nuclear shell at Ukraine or vice versa, at that instance, we are in DEFCON 1 in the European theater. We're not in DEFCON 1 in the U.S. Most people think DEFCON 1 means global nuclear war. No, it just means there's a nuclear war going on. DEFCON 1 in Europe. Now, if somehow a shell goes and lands in Africa, whatever, and now the question is, can we contain it? And there's a strong consensus that it's not containable, and therefore we're on the verge of destruction. Okay, and there's that, but that's not all. There is a massive genocide and destruction and massive killing of people going on in Southern Africa and Yemen. Not Southern Africa, in Yemen, okay? There is now a massive new war, I say a new war in the Middle East, which is going to ignite major terrorist responses. I assure you, they're coming. Count on it. And they're going to try to outdo the last time. And the second thing is that the people in the know who don't want to talk about this, but it gets out once in a while, know something that every American should know, that care and plan on voting for anybody, and that is the idea that all of the nuclear weapons or nuclear weapon grade material that ultimately peaked in the 1980s at 86,000 weapons and God knows what else, that all of it has all been accounted for and it's all been dealt with. That is a myth. It's ridiculous. The idea that there could be nuclear materials or direct weapons that could be used in a terrorist attack is almost a near certainty. And the only reason it hasn't happened is because that is a serious move, right? That is a card you don't play unless you feel you can win the hand or you just don't care anymore. And so the idea of a non-state operator nuclear event, not just Ukraine or Russia firing a tactical nuke shell, but a non-state operator going off in a city, pick a city. They're not going to pick some silly city. They're going to pick a good one. And imagine that happening. A non-state operator, and then either nobody claims responsibility or 100 terrorist group claim responsibility. And so who the hell do you respond to? What are you going to do? You say, well, we lost the city. What can you do? We don't know who to respond to. So we're going to put out some messages and some press releases saying, please don't nuke any more cities. No, all hell is going to break loose, but it gets worse. And it's been brought up a number of times by former secretaries of defense, occasionally, the odd person here, but again, it then settles down because people can't handle these truths. They will all go crazy. They're just so delicate. Weapons in space. EMTs. What is an EMT? An EMT is a nuclear bomb going off of a certain type, going off at a certain altitude that can virtually take out the entire electrical systems of the United States. A former Secretary of Defense actually went public about 6 years ago and said if such an EMT device ever went off, within 1 year, half the population of the United States would be dead. The press printed it, and we moved on.
Yeah.
And here's the problem with that. We track every missile that's launched by anybody, I assure you. Unless it's one of those rockets you get from Amazon, you play with in your backyard, everything is tracked. And so we know instantly its trajectory. We know where it's going. We know where it's going to land. And if it's going to land in another country, boy, we're going to be all over that. But if you send a rocket into orbit, you're just launching a satellite. It's legal to do that. There are a lot of countries that do that. You can't stop. Any country that can get a satellite up there, by God, hey, just don't run into the other satellites. So if North Korea puts a satellite in orbit, if it happens to have a bomb in it, how do you even know? I do not believe we have the ability to detect a nuclear weapon in space, reasonably shielded. I don't think so, but that's never talked about either. And so could there be nuclear weapons in space? Yeah. Could one of them go off at any time and take out an EMT takeout of the United States? Yeah. Or another country. Could that launch global nuclear war? Yeah. Right? Have we got a new war in the Middle East now that is tapping into a feud that goes back 2,000 years? Yeah. And so the world is on the goddamn brink. All right? That's the situation. And the point that I've been making for years is this. The inevitability of these things happening is almost a certainty. We were going to have a nuclear event. We're probably going to have a nuclear terrorist event. And while we love to make movies and streaming series where the good guys always stop it and it makes, they got the weapon and whatever, and they always find it, it doesn't go off and makes us feel better. Hey, we're okay because I've seen movies where it didn't happen. That's movies. There have been a number of movies where it does happen, right? These movies don't get as much press, but it does happen, right? And one of the most important movies was made many years ago, and it was called The Day After. And it's about a nuclear war getting underway from the perspective of the people of Kansas City. And there are people that saw that movie. They didn't sleep for months. It's getting some play now. There's actually posts going up saying you need to watch this movie. And so let's just get real. 12,000 years since the flood, we have created the world we live in now. It's got too many people, too many nuclear weapons, too many people don't even have food, clothing, and housing, and all hell's going to break loose, and it is breaking loose, and we really haven't been able to fix it. We're not even close. We don't even try to reduce nuclear weapons now. We're totally baffled by terrorism. And so all hell's going to break loose. Okay. And that gets me to my point. There are two sets of possibilities embedded in what's going on right now. One of them has to do with what I just talked about. We can have that very, very dangerous, extraordinary event, a nuclear exchange, a terrorist nuclear attack, an EMT attack, or whatever else, or something more fundamental, like China just decides to take Taiwan and completely overruns it in a week. Something like that will really put the world on the brink. We can have one of those in before disclosure or after disclosure. We can have that event take place before the confirmation of this issue take place or afterwards. And it is not a distinction without a difference. If one of those things is going to happen, and I think disclosure could help prevent that, let it be in the post-disclosure world. Why? A nuclear exchange occurs in the Ukraine. Russia fires a tactical nuke, takes out, a significant part of a city. Ukraine happens to have one too, fires back. And the world is going, oh my God. But at that point, it happens. When that moment occurs, everybody on this planet will know something they don't know now. And that is, some know, but most don't. We're not alone in the universe. We're not only not alone, there are other civilizations as advanced or more advanced than us. And not only that, a number of them are already engaging us and have actually engaged us in the past. So we're part of a galactic thing. We're potentially going to be able to deal with other civilizations. And probably the information will become more available about how close we are to our own interstellar drive, our own interstellar travel. We're closing in on it very fast. I don't understand the equations, but I do know science, and I have a degree in physics. And that's just what's in the public domain. God knows what's going on in the private domain, in the secret world. We're close to having our own starships. And so literally, a whole galaxy is before us. We're not alone, right? You know, you may think you're special because you're Chinese or you're Russian or you're Muslim or Christian or whatever the hell you think you are, but you're just humans. And there's other species. That's all there before us. And so, do we want to have a global nuclear war because a couple of idiots launched some tactical nukes in the Ukraine-Russian war? Or some terrorist blows up a city because that's what they do. We have an opportunity to step back and go, okay, let's think about this. But I'll tell you something. If that same thing happens before disclosure, which we haven't gotten, we're going to do exactly what we have always done. We will just be what we are. The most destructive animal, the most dangerous animal in our known world. We will kill anything. We will blow anything up. And let me be clear. If you recall the response the U.S. made when some planes flew into our buildings, try to imagine the response the U.S. will make if a relatively popular city in the United States is taken out by a terrorist nuclear non-state event. What do you think the response to that is going to be? And so that's the decision. Get disclosure as soon as possible. So if we're unable to prevent what seems to be inevitable, we will be able to react in a different way. And here's the second reason. It's a little less profound, a little closer to home, but I'm rather fond of it. It's real simple. We can have disclosure pretty much before the next big, expensive election, presidential election year of the United States, or we can have it down the line somewhere. I don't know, October, September, after the next president takes office or whatever. Okay. And what difference does it make? Oh boy, what difference does it make? First of all, the election that the United States is about to go through is going to be one of the most awful, disgusting, ridiculous, bizarre, comical, destructive elections ever.
Yes.
It's going to be off the charts.
Yes.
Okay?
I absolutely and completely agree with you. From what I have read, it is going to be Biden versus Trump again.
Whatever. I don't want to get into the partisan side of it. I mean, I don't want to get into specifics. I'm just saying, whatever happened, it's going to be one of the worst of all time. It's going to be hell. All right. And so, wow. Do we need that? We've already had this. When is it going to end? Okay. So that, I think, is a given. Okay. So we can just let things drag on and it'll be what it's going to be. But it'll be made even worse by the fact that the reality of non-human presence and technology is hanging above it all. It's already been informally confirmed. But there's no disclosure yet. So it's just hanging there. And so 2,000 balloted candidates, and that's about the right number, 2,000 balloted candidates wanting to be the next senator, the next representative, the next governor of an important state, as well as a lot of significant state senator jobs, which are influential, 2,000 balloted candidates are going to have to go out. They're going to have to raise the usual amount of money. The election is going to cost about $5 to $6 billion. They're going to have to raise millions of dollars. They're going to have to go out, make complete asses of themselves, be inauthentic, be incredibly hyper partisan, scream and yell at each other, actually convey almost nothing of value, and then become the next government of the United States in 2025. And if asked anything about this issue, it's like, David Grusch, who's he? Non-human tech? I don't know about that. ETs or something? That's crazy stuff. Whatever. Maybe one or two will say, look, I've actually been paying attention, and I think there is an ET presence, and then the opponents will just slam them. In other words, it'll just be even more bizarre.
Yeah.
Because the world knows there's an ET presence, and it's going to see 2,000 politicians acting like they still haven't figured it out. Or here's the other possibility. We get the hearings in January, blows everybody's mind. The president comes forward late January, early February, at least a month before the first primary. I don't understand the Iowa caucus. I don't ever want to understand it. Before the election formally gets underway. It's underway. People start running for office the day after they win the election. I get that. But the formal election starts with the first primary, at least a month before that, which means that all 2,000 of these candidates will know on the same day there is an extraterrestrial presence. We have non-human tech. Most of everything that are in the books behind me is true, right? Wow, a new world. And they will have the opportunity to go read the books. Watch the documentaries. It's so easy to find. They could read Bryce Zabel and Richard Dolan's book, AD After Disclosure. Great book. They could all read it, right? They could get up to speed. They could become at least semi-knowledgeable about the issue, have an opinion about it. And so instead of the election we're almost certain to have, we're going to have an election in which the most profound issue in human history, totally nonpartisan, can be addressed by people that have had some time to at least look into it and answer intelligently about it. And that will be the focus of this election, and it will suck the venom out of it and actually make it probably an enjoyable experience. And when it's done, we will have elected 435 members of Congress, 33 members of the Senate, I don't know, maybe 20 governors. And by and large, the electorate will know what their view is about the new reality we're in, about the fact that we're not alone, about the fact that we have non-human tech, the fact that there is some legislative process about getting that information, about their view of our right to know, our need to know, right? We will know their position. And we will be able to elect them with and factor that in. And we end up with a government in 2025 in which there's some understanding and some acknowledgement of this truth. The difference between these two elections, I cannot stress, one night and day. And so these two things, these are the two reasons that Senator Schumer, Warner, and Rubio have got, and they're the ones that make the call. The president cannot force them to hold a hearing. The Supreme Court cannot force them to hold a hearing. Another committee chair cannot force it. I'm not even sure that Schumer can enforce it, but boy, he certainly has enormous leverage in this instance. It's in their hands. Now, I talked to Tim Burchett, who is a hero here, and along with Luna and Mace and several others, they're pushing from the House as best they can. They've actually had a hearing. They want to have another one. God bless them. They're helping. They're putting pressure. But that's a South subcommittee meeting is not going to be what it's going to require to get disclosure from the president appropriately. It needs to be the Senate Intel Committee. So they have got to call this hearing. They have got to call it in January. And that is why recently I launched my first real, what I call pure activist project in quite a while. And it is called Shift Storm. Don't forget the F. You can find it at shiftstorm.org, or the link is on my website. It's all over my Twitter. It's on my Facebook. And by the way, follow me on Twitter at Steve Bassett. Okay. I need all the followers I can get. And it's simple. It's as easy as it could be. Here's what we want. And by the way, anybody in the world can do this. It's not limited to the United States. how many billion people are in Twitter? 1, 2, 3, whatever the hell. In other words, if you're on Twitter, here's what we want you to do. We want you to tag a message to all 3 of these heroes, and they are heroes: Senator Schumer, Senator Rubio, Senator Warren. They all have Twitter accounts. They all have handles, and I've published those handles, right? And you tag a message to them. Why tag a message? What am I talking about? A lot of Twitter people don't even know about this. But when you tag somebody in a message, that message shows up in their notification box, not on their feed, just their notification box. Meaning there's something up there with your tag in it, your handle in it, and we're letting you know. And every one of the members of Congress, and virtually everyone, has a Twitter account. They have staffers that monitored that notification box, because that's how they can find out how what people are saying about them, at least on Twitter. And so they monitor it. No big deal. If something comes up that they feel that the chief of staff or the member needs to know, they'll let them know. So our goal is 100,000. 100,000 tagged messages to all 3 of them. That's 300,000 messages. Respectful, polite. Remember, they're the heroes, but firm. Senator Schumer, Senator Rubio, Senator Warner. We want this Senate hearings to begin in January. We want these witnesses to testify, right? In January, we must have that hearing. Thank you very much. And some praise. Love what you're doing. Love the legislation. You're my hero. We want those hearings in January. 100,000 messages. When those messages start accumulating in the notification box, the staffers are going to go, whoa, hello. And they're going to call up the chief of staff with a member and say, you need to check the notification box. And they'll just do that. They'll open up Twitter, they'll go to the notification box, and boom, there they are, scrolling. They'll just scroll. Boom, 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 boom. It's that easy. But we don't want to stop there, because all 3 members accept emails. They don't give out their email address. They have a form. And so send them an email. And of course, I publish the link to the form. You go to the form, you fill it out, you put the messages in. Senator Schumer, we must have hearings for the witnesses, including Grusch, in January. We cannot wait, right? The bill will be passed. We need these hearings, and we want more legislation. We love the job you're doing. You're American hero, blah, blah, blah. And start filling up that email box that the staffers also follow until they go to the member and say, you got to check the email box. The member goes, and the member doesn't have to be, they're going to be home for the last half of the month. They leave tomorrow. It's okay. They have computers at home, and so they'll call them up at home, or and they'll say, you need to check the email box, and they'll go over and go, whoa, boom, 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 boom. That's shitstorm, right? 100,000 tag messages and emails to each of these members. Polite, no epithets. They're heroes. They didn't oppose the bill. They wanted the bill.
Yeah.
The reason I'm focusing on them, and there are people that want to send emails and stuff to Comer and Turner and telling them how awful they are and they're evil and they're demons. No, don't even bother. The bill is done. Now it's the hearings, and the hearings are in the hands of the heroes. And so that's who we've got to go after. That is shitstorm. You can make history if you can convince them or help them to arrive at the decision that it's time for those hearings to happen, and it has to be no later than January. All right?
Well, Steve,
So,
on that note, let me close things down for today. I think that we have given people an amazing, absolutely amazing and compelling walkthrough. What you have described goes so far beyond the basic trajectory of disclosure. You were taking it all the way through. I would love to have you back on.
People are locked into the granular stuff, the details. They're seeing that, and they're getting, and they're getting crazy. And I'm saying, look. You have to see the larger picture. It starts to make sense, and you see where it's going. That's my job. I'm not a researcher. I'm an activist.
And what I want to do is send them to, I absolutely want people to visit paradigmresearchgroup.org, your website. I want them to get involved with Project Shift Storm. Don't forget the F. Steve Bassett on Twitter. And of course, for anyone watching, I want them to subscribe to my channel on YouTube as well and help us grow and reach more people. So Steve, let me thank you so much for your time today. And I want to again bid you a farewell, and we will have you back. Okay.
Promos. Got to do some promos, right? Got to do promos. Okay. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Some promos. Okay. Look, you mentioned it. Look, follow me on Twitter at Steve Bassett. Appreciate that. There is some things going on. There's a conference coming up. I'm going to be speaking at the Conscious Life Expo. I think it's February 9, I think, to 12. We anticipate 25,000 people are going to be there. It's going to be pretty intense. That's in February, LAX Hilton. Also, I'm going to be speaking to the Contact in the Desert, May 30 to June 3. That's going to be a big deal. It's going to be twice the number of people as last year. It's at the Indian Wells Resort, the Renaissance Hotel, Indian Wells, just south of Palm Springs. And given what could happen between now and May 30, it could be one amazing celebration. And so please join me. But you can buy your tickets when you buy your tickets. But folks, if you want to be in the hotel, you've got to get that hotel now. Book it now. You cannot book it too soon, or any of the hotels in the area. And so I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Also, I want to mention that the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, which I talked about, is focused on the post-disclosure world, right? It's not the only thing. There are entities and projects all over the place that are now targeting the post-disclosure world. There are projects in various degree of development all across Los Angeles County in the media. 2 major documentary series were already released by A-list people. 2 years ago, J.J. Abrams launched a 4-part documentary called UFO documentary, right? Highest rated show in the history of Showtime. Just a month ago, Steven Spielberg, the man, dropped a 4-part documentary series called Encounters. It's just the beginning. That's why we're setting up the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. There is an avalanche of material coming out of Hollywood. Meanwhile, think tanks are being formed. Gary Nolan has formed a think tank called Soul. It's going to be mostly technology and science-based. Very important people, significant people connected to that. He is preparing for the post-disclosure world, bringing together top people. Danny Sheehan has launched the New Paradigm Institute, which has got some initial funding. The New Paradigm Institute is completely targeting the post-disclosure world. Very substantial group of advisors is collecting around it. It's raising money. Already has an office open in DC, 1 block from the Capitol. You can hit it with a 9-iron. Okay. I am pretty sure that every major think tank in Washington, the Cato Institute, the Enterprise, the Heritage Foundation, Enterprise Institute, American Center for American Progress, every one of them is already meeting, privately to discuss how they are going to engage the post-disclosure world, have a division set up and whatever. And there's probably think tanks being formed right now we don't even know about. Paradigm Research Group, which has been an activist sole proprietorship, is about to become a nonprofit. As soon as I get 2,000 together, I'm going to go to LegalZoom and convert it to a nonprofit 501c3A. It's 501c3. So there are developments behind the scenes that people are not aware of, but I am aware of, in which you have a great deal of activity that is literally about getting ready for the post-disclosure world. I hope that's true of industry. I know it's true of the think tanks in this town, and I know it's true of Hollywood. And so, what can I say? The reason that's happening is because they know. It's just a question of, can we get it done as soon as possible? And I think we have a reasonable chance. This bill that was just passed is not a major barrier. It is another bill. And I'm pretty confident, and I'll end with this for sure, is that if we get disclosure from the president in January, the UAP Disclosure Act, which I love that they called it that, will be reintroduced as a standalone bill post-disclosure, and I think it'll fly right through Congress. So let's see about that.